Man, this family just really can't catch a break from unruly, rude ghosts. Insidious 2. First watch review. Hey Twisted people, it's your Twisted Girl next door here, and today this is my first watch review segment because if I haven't seen it, it's new to me. Insidious 2 is the sequel, of course, to Insidious 1, which takes place directly, right after the first movie, and continues with the plot line of the family from the first movie who continue to be plagued by these ghosts that just won't catch the hint that no means no in terms of trying to take over someone's body. Okay, so full disclosure, I have a hard and true rule that I have when it comes to horror franchises. And that rule is when it comes to the movies in the horror franchise, the first one is usually the best one. The sequel, for whatever reason, just sucks. And then the third one tends to redeem all the wrong things that happened in the sequel. So I am curious to see if Insidious 2 actually beats that rule. The plot of this story continues to be one of its strongest suits. As I said in my review of Insidious 1, which you can check out on my channel, I really enjoy the mystery that unfolds and what is the backstory of the family members, and the way they interact and relate to these entities, these ghosts. And it really works. And they continue with that story. And that makes sense because this is the same exact story in the sense of it's a continuation of the first movie. So that worked. It's still one of its strongest suits. It didn't get to the point where, like sometimes that happens in sequels, they tend to over-explain way too much. They create stuff that just was like, that came out of nowhere. You just pulled that from anywhere. What are you doing? They go against canon. They go against the rules that they made in the first movie. This film did a very good job of not doing that. And so I appreciated that it was in the same vein and that there were no glaring you wouldn't have been able to do that in the first movie, so why are you doing it now? Once again, all of the family members were still very much in character. I enjoyed the pace of the film. It wasn't overly long. It worked just like the first movie, which was like over an hour and a half, a little bit. The sequel was around the same, a little bit, maybe just a little bit longer, but it worked. And I didn't feel like, oh my gosh, why is this movie still going? It was a good pace. The characters stayed true to the way we knew them and got to know them in the first movie. So I appreciated, once again, it's like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And I think in this sense of the plot line and the characters, the sequel stayed true to that. My major flaw with this film, and mainly because I think it really took away from what made it great in the first one, which was too much of a good thing is a bad thing. I noted in my review of the first film that I loved the balance of humor and scares. Like, there were some comedic kind of characters in there, and they worked for the first one because there wasn't a lot of them. They kind of came in towards the end. They kind of were interwove within the plot line, not so much kind of having their own thing to do, which made it so it didn't feel like a break from what was going on in the bigger atmosphere. And I don't know what happened, but in this sequel, they gave them way more screen time. And I know what that is because even when I watched this first film, the first one in this franchise, I really liked them in a smaller dosage. So I'm pretty sure what happened was people were like, yeah, people really like them. We should give them more time. And it's like, no, there doesn't need to be a B plot in this horror film. It doesn't need to be watch their zany adventure and them getting into trouble and things of that nature. And there were times when it descended into silly territory. There were times when I'm like, can we get back to the main plot line? I think this movie is similar to the first one when it comes to if it's how scary you would think it is. It's not so much that the first one was like, oh my God, scary, I'm going to check under my bed. There were just some really creepy things that happened in it, and it was just a creepy atmosphere overall. And I think they kept that in the same vein with this sequel, minus the unnecessary comedic relief that kept going on. What happens when something's descends into silly territory or is just too much up on the comedy, it can take away from the stakes. It can take away from that fear factor that myself as a viewer will get when I've settled into the atmosphere of the film. And when you do that, when you do too many breaks, too many comedic relief breaks, it takes away from the stakes. That and the mystery, of the first one is kind of what gets you the most when it comes to the plot line. And since in the sequel, all the cards are kind of laid bare for the most part, you aren't as surprised with certain twists and turns. Yes, this film is Stab approved. I think it still had some good plot lines. It had some good elements of the scares. And, you would watch it for no other reason but to see what happens with this family. Like, what's the conclusion from the first film? Because the first film really sets up for you to need to watch this sequel. And you can't watch this sequel without watching the first film. So it works really well. It's just not as good as the first one, but it's not horrible. So in that sense, Insidious 2 did break my rule a little bit. I mean, there's exceptions to every rule. Not many, though, to my rules. But in this sense, it kind of half beat my rule because it wasn't better than the first one, but it wasn't horrendous where it's part of a franchise where we're like, yeah, just skip over the sequel. Don't watch that. So, what did you think of Insidious 2? Do you agree with my horror rule when it comes to horror franchises? Let me know. Comment down below. Let me know your thoughts. And also, be sure to subscribe so that you are the first to know when I post my videos of all things horror. Thanks for watching. Let's get creepy together.